Some sounds aren't meant to be heard. They are meant to be buried, forgotten, locked away in the dark where the human mind can't reach them. My name is Elias Thorne. I restore things. Old audio, degraded tapes, ruined vinyl. People bring me the voices of their dead grandparents, their forgotten weddings, the echoes of their past. I clean the noise. I bring the dead back to life, just for a moment. It's quiet, lonely work, and I used to love the quiet. Used to. It started in late November, the kind of bitter, freezing month where the dampness sinks into your bones. A package arrived at my studio in Oregon. No return address. Just a heavy, rusted lockbox. Inside, resting on a bed of decaying velvet, was a reel-to-reel audio tape. And a note. The note had only 3 words. Make him confess. I should have thrown it away, or called the police. But curiosity is a disease, and I've always been sick. I spooled the tape onto my Studer A80 machine, put on my headphones, and pressed play. For the first 2 minutes, nothing. Just the hiss of degraded magnetic tape. Static. Empty space. But then, I heard the breathing. It was slow, deliberate. The sound of someone sitting perfectly still in a very small room. Then a voice spoke. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a memory. The voice said, "I know you're listening, Elias." I froze. My blood turned to ice. This tape looked like it was from the 1970s. The casing was brittle. The magnetic strip was decaying. But the voice knew my name. "You think you're safe in that studio?" The voice continued, smooth and entirely devoid of emotion. "But you left your front door unlocked." My eyes darted to the hallway. The red glow of the recording sign illuminated the heavy oak door of my apartment. I couldn't remember if I had turned the deadbolt. I reached out, my hand trembling, and hit pause. Silence flooded the room. But it wasn't the comfortable silence I was used to. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a room that is no longer empty. I took the headphones off, placed them on the desk. From the hallway, I heard a floorboard creak. Not a house-settling creak. The distinct, compressed weight of a footstep. I held my breath. My eyes stayed locked on the door handle. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then, the brass handle slowly began to turn. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The fear had paralyzed my vocal cords. The door swung open, revealing the pitch-black void of my hallway. There was no one there. Just a cold wind blowing in from the street. I really had left the front door open. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, my heart hammering against my ribs. I walked over, shut the door, and locked the deadbolt. Twice. It was just paranoia. A prank. Someone playing a sick joke. That's what I told myself. I walked back to my desk. I sat down. I looked at the reel-to-reel machine. The play button was pressed down. The spools were turning. I hadn't pressed play. I put the headphones back on. Locking the door won't help Elias. The voice whispered through the static. I'm already inside. And that's when I felt the cold breath against the back of my neck. I didn't turn around. I couldn't move. Every muscle in my body had turned to stone. The air in the room didn't just feel cold. It felt unnatural, like the atmosphere from a deep, underground tomb had suddenly filled my studio. The weight of the presence behind my chair was massive. It felt suffocating. And yet, there was only silence. No more breathing. No movement. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, I reached for the light switch on my desk lamp. Click. The harsh white light flooded the area. I spun my chair around, bracing for impact. Nothing. The corner of the room was empty. The door was locked. My shadow stretched across the floor, thin and jagged. I was alone. The logic in my brain finally started to filter through the terror. Hallucinations, high stress, lack of sleep, sensory deprivation. My mind was playing tricks on me. My ears, they are trained to find things in the silence, and today, they had created something that wasn't there. I laughed, a dry, pathetic sound in the empty room. I was done for the night. I needed fresh air. I needed to see other people. I needed to believe that the world was still normal. I left the tape running, let it hiss and pop on its own. I grabbed my keys, threw on my heavy coat, and left the studio. The Portland rain was relentless. It didn't wash things clean. It just made everything heavier. I walked past closed coffee shops and abandoned bookstores, the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of my boots the only counterpoint to the rain. I found an all-night diner, Maggie's Kettle. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, casting a sickly pink and green light onto the sidewalk. Inside, it smelled of stale grease and burned coffee. I loved it. It was real. I sat at the counter, ordered a black coffee, and watched the waitress, a tired woman named Sarah, clean the griddle. I watched two truckers laugh about a broken transmission. They were normal. Their problems were normal. I pulled the rusted metal lockbox out of my coat pocket. I had carried it with me without thinking. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner, it looked less menacing. Just a piece of garbage. I started scraping the rust off the corner of the lid with the edge of a quarter. I wanted to find serial number, a date, anything. A flake of dark blue paint came off, and then I saw it. It wasn't a serial number. It was an emblem. It was a small, crudely engraved symbol. Two inverted triangles overlapping, and inside the intersection, a single, unblinking eye. I didn't recognize the symbol, but looking at it made me uneasy. It felt wrong, like a word that shouldn't exist. What you got there, hon? I jumped. Sarah was filling my coffee cup. Just an antique, I stammered, pulling the box closer to my chest, testing my restoration skills. She eyed me suspiciously. You look like you've seen a ghost, Elias. And that thing looks like something I'd find in my grandma's root cellar. The one she said was cursed. She laughed and walked away, but I didn't join in. Cursed. I finished my coffee in a single, scaling gulp. The diner didn't feel safe anymore. Nothing did. The silence wasn't in my studio. It was in my head. I got back to the studio at 3 a.m. I was exhausted, but sleep was impossible. The adrenaline was long gone, replaced by a deep, vibrating dread. My door was still locked. The studio was dark. The Studer A80 machine was still spinning. It had reached the end of the reel. The loose end of the magnetic tape was whipping around and around the take-up spool, creating a rhythmic, mechanical slap, slap, slap. A pattern. The very thing I was trained to analyze. I walked to the desk, not bothering to turn on the lights. The moonlight from the window was enough. Slap, slap, slap. The sound was comforting in its predictability. I reached out to stop the machine, but my hand froze over the switch, because the pattern, it wasn't the tape hitting the machine. It was coming from inside the machine, from the speaker I had forgotten to turn off. The reel-to-reel tape was empty. It was not moving, and yet the speaker was broadcasting. Slap, slap, slap. I leaned in closer, my ear inches from the speaker cone. It wasn't a slap. It was the sound of something wet, dragging across a wooden floor. Drag rest. Drag rest. It was the sound of something that couldn't walk, hauling itself towards me. I didn't run. I couldn't. That sound, the wet, heavy dragging, it stopped exactly 3 feet behind me. I sat there, staring at my own reflection in the dark window of the studio. I looked like a ghost. My skin was sallow, my eyes sunken. Then the speaker hissed one last time. A new voice came through. It wasn't the cold, mechanical man from before. It was a girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. Elias, are you still hiding? I can't find you. My heart didn't just beat. It felt like it was trying to break through my ribs. That voice. I knew that voice. I had spent 15 years trying to forget it. Maya. I whispered into the empty room. Maya, my younger sister. She had disappeared during a summer camping trip in 1998. No body was ever found. No clues. Just an empty tent and the sound of the wind through the pines. But this recording, it sounded fresh. Clear. It's dark in the box, Elias. The voice of my sister whimpered. The man with the triangles. He says you're coming to get me. Are you coming? Then a scream. Short, sharp, cut off by the sound of a heavy metal lid slamming shut. The tape machine finally clicked off. The silence that followed was absolute. I didn't care about the presence in the room anymore. I didn't care about the locked door. I tore through my archives, throwing reels of tape and old files onto the floor. I needed to know where that box was. I searched the symbol online, the two triangles with the eye. I went deep into the dark web archives of local folklore. I found it in a digital scan of a newspaper from 1924, The Order of the Architect, a small, radical cult that believed silence was the only way to reach God. They didn't kill their victims. They stilled them. They would place people in soundproofed underground chambers and leave them there with nothing but the sound of their own heartbeat until they went mad. And the location of their last known sanctuary? An abandoned limestone quarry, only 12 miles from my studio. I drove like a madman. The rain had turned to a thick, suffocating fog that clung to my windshield like a shroud. The quarry was a graveyard of rusted iron and broken stone. As I stepped out of the car, the silence hit me like a physical blow. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed to die down as it passed over the edge of the pit. I took my flashlight and the heavy crowbar. I found the entrance to the lower levels behind a collapsed shed. A heavy iron door, rusted shut, with that same symbol carved deep into the metal. The triangles, the eye. I jammed the crowbar into the seal and leaned into it with everything I had. My muscles screamed. The metal groaned, a high-pitched screech that echoed through the empty quarry. Finally it gave way. The air that rushed out of the tunnel smelled of ancient dust and ozone. I stepped inside. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating walls of smooth, carved limestone. And then, I heard it. Not from a speaker, not from a tape. It was coming from the end of the tunnel. The sound of a small, rhythmic tapping. Clink, clink, clink. Like someone was hitting a metal pipe with a wedding ring. I started to run. "Maya," I shouted. My voice bounced off the walls, distorted and strange. I reached a central chamber. In the middle of the room sat a single object. It was a box. A large, rectangular chest made of heavy, black iron. It was bolted to the floor. The tapping was coming from inside. I threw myself onto the lid. "I'm here. Maya, I'm here." I began to work the bolts with the crowbar, sweating despite the freezing cold. One by one, they snapped. With a final, desperate heave, I threw the lid open. I expected to see my sister. I expected to see a ghost. But the box was empty, except for one thing. Sitting at the very bottom was a modern, high-end digital recorder. It was active. The little red, recording, light was blinking. I picked it up with a trembling hand. There was one file on the screen. Label live feed. I pressed play. A voice came through the tiny speaker. It was my own voice. From 10 seconds ago. "I'm here. Maya, I'm here." And then, I heard the heavy iron door of the chamber slam shut behind me. The echo of the slamming door seemed to last forever. When it finally faded, the silence that replaced it was absolute. It was heavy. It pressed against my eardrums like deep water. I threw myself against the iron door. I screamed until my throat tasted like copper. I beat my fists against the rusted metal until my knuckles bled. It didn't move a fraction of an inch. I was buried alive. I slid down the cold stone wall, gasping for air. The flashlight flickered and died. The only light left in the tomb was the tiny, glowing screen of the digital recorder in my hand. I stared at it. The live feed had stopped recording. A new file appeared on the screen. The date on the file wasn't today. It was July 14th, 1998, the day my sister disappeared. My thumb hovered over the play button. My hand was shaking so violently I could barely hold the device. Deep down, beneath the fear, beneath the denial, something ancient and ugly began to stir my memory. I pressed play. The audio was crisp. It was a beautiful summer afternoon. I could hear birds, the rustle of pine trees. And then, I heard laughter. You can't find me, Elias. Maya's voice. Happy. Teasing. Then another voice. Younger, but unmistakably mine. I know where you are, Maya. You're in the old hunting trunk. No, I'm not. The sound of heavy footsteps on dry leaves. The squeak of rusty metal hinges. Gotcha, my younger voice yelled. Maya giggled. Okay, let me out now, she said. Then, the sound of the heavy trunk lid slamming shut. A metallic click. The padlock sliding into place. Elias, it's dark in here. Open it. Just 10 more seconds, my younger self said, laughing. That's the rule of the game. I listened to the recording, paralyzed. Tears streamed down my face in the dark. On the tape, my younger self tried to turn the key. It didn't turn. Elias, please, it's hard to breathe. The sound of me struggling with the lock, kicking it, hitting it with a rock. It was jammed, rusted solid. Elias, let me out. Please, I'm scared. Maya was screaming now, banging her little fists against the thick wood of the trunk. And then, the worst sound of all, the sound of my footsteps running away. I ran. I left her there. I was 13 years old, and I was terrified of what my father would do to me. I ran back to the campsite and lied. I said I turned around and she was just gone. In the dark of the limestone cell, the realization crushed me like a physical weight. There was no order of the architect. There was no cult. The mind is a brilliant, terrifying thing. When it cannot handle a trauma, it buries it. It creates a story, a monster to take the blame. The note in the box. Make him confess. It wasn't a threat from a stranger. It was a demand from my own fractured psyche. My subconscious had spent 15 years building this trap, sending the tape, leading me here. I brought myself here, to face what I did, to take her place. The recording on the device faded into static. Then, one final voice spoke from the speaker. It was the cold, emotionless voice from the very first tape. Are you ready to listen now, Elias? I looked at the iron door. I looked at the pitch-black void around me. There was no way out. No one knew I was here. I closed my eyes. I'm listening, I whispered into the dark. The red light on the recorder blinked twice and went out, leaving me alone, in the perfect, endless silence. The silence is never truly empty, is it? If this story found a way into your thoughts tonight, let us know in the comments. We want to hear about the shadows in your world. To stay in the dark with us, hit the like button and subscribe to the Blackwood Files. Turn on the notifications, because you never know when the next tape will arrive. Don't look behind you. Just keep listening. Sleep well, if you can.